The scent of freshly ground coffee and cinnamon always takes me back to that first day at the Corner Dreams Cafe. It was October 2024. Golden leaves danced outside the window, and I held my daughter Sophia's small, cold hand as I pushed open the heavy wooden door. 8 months had passed since we lost Emma, and I still woke up every morning expecting to hear her laughter echoing through the halls of our new home in Millbrook. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment below about your own experiences with second chances and how love appeared in your life when you least expected it. Until the next story. Like this video if you also believe that sometimes destiny puts us exactly where we need to be. And subscribe to the channel because this story will show how the deepest secrets can both destroy and save a life. Moving to Vermont wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Manhattan stifled our grief with its noisy streets and memories on every corner. Millbrook promised the opposite, a small town where no one knew our tragedy, where Sophia might finally smile again without carrying the weight of neighbors' pitying glances. The Green Mountains embraced the small town like protective arms, and the softly painted wooden houses looked like a scene from a 1950s romantic movie. I was Tyler Brooks, 36, a former creative director who traded skyscrapers for rural tranquility. My packed schedule of meetings and ad campaigns now boiled down to taking care of Sophia and trying to understand why such a talkative girl had become so quiet. She always carried her drawing pad, preferring to express her feelings through colors and shapes rather than words. Therapists said it was normal, that children process trauma in different ways, but I felt like I was losing my daughter a little more each day. Sophia was 6, with blue eyes just like her mother's. Before the accident, she was a tireless chatterbox, always making up stories about brave princesses and gentle dragons. Now, her drawings always showed figures holding hands, one big, one small, and an empty space where a third should have been. She still talked to me, but her words were measured, careful, as if each one cost immense effort. The Corner Dreams was on Main Street, a red brick building with large windows and white linen curtains. Inside, worn leather sofas shared space with rustic wooden tables, and plants hung from the ceiling, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The aroma was a perfect blend of roasted beans, spices, and something indefinable that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen. That's when I saw her for the first time. Rachel was behind the counter, brown hair pulled back in a messy bun, apron tied around her slender waist. She was in her 30s, maybe younger, and when she smiled at us, something in her face made me pause. It wasn't just professional kindness, there was a depth in her dark eyes that didn't quite match the relaxed atmosphere of a small coffee shop. "First time here, isn't it?" she asked, and her voice had a melodic tone that made Sophia lift her gaze from the floor for the first time in weeks. "We just moved to town," I replied, still holding my daughter's hand. "We're exploring the area." Rachel leaned over the counter, focusing completely on Sophia. "I bet you like hot chocolate with marshmallows. I have some special ones I make just for talented artists." My heart quickened. How did she know Sophia drew? My daughter wasn't carrying her pad, and we'd never been there before. But before I could question it, Sophia nodded shyly, and for the first time in months, I saw a small smile playing on her lips. "And for Dad, let me guess, black coffee, strong, no sugar. You look like you need pure caffeine to face the day." She was right again. Completely right. As Rachel prepared our orders, I watched how she moved with a grace that seemed rehearsed, as if every gesture was carefully calculated. Her hands were delicate but steady, and when she drew a small heart in the foam of my coffee, I realized there was something more to her than initially met the eye. "You'll like Millbrook," she said, handing Sophia the hot chocolate with 2 star-shaped marshmallows. "It's the kind of place where people find exactly what they're looking for, even when they don't know what that is." The following days settled into a comforting routine. Every morning, Sophia and I would walk the 3 blocks to Corner Dreams, and we always found Rachel there, as if she were specifically waiting for us. There was something magnetic about the way she interacted with us, not forced or overly solicitous, but natural, as if she'd known us for years. In the second week, I started noticing small details that intrigued me. Rachel never had to ask for our orders. She simply started preparing the black coffee and hot chocolate the moment she saw us through the window. When other customers placed complicated orders, she'd write everything down carefully, but with us, she seemed to have a photographic memory. "Daddy, why does she always know what we want?" Sophia asked quietly as we colored together at one of the corner tables. It was the first spontaneous question she'd asked in months, and my heart filled with cautious hope. "Some people are very observant, little one," I replied, but her question echoed in my mind for the rest of the day. Rachel displayed knowledge that didn't make sense for an ordinary barista. When Sophia drew a purple unicorn, Rachel commented on how complementary colors created visual harmony, a concept I'd learned in years of design work. When I casually mentioned I was having trouble sleeping, she suggested a specific chamomile and lavender tea, explaining in detail how the natural properties of these plants affected the nervous system. "Did you study botany?" I asked one day, genuinely curious. She paused for a moment, the cup she was drying suspended in the air. "Just a hobby," she replied quickly, but her cheeks flushed slightly. The third week brought the first truly suspicious moment. I was leafing through a mystery novel I'd bought at the local bookstore, Shadows on the Silent Lake, when Rachel arrived with our orders. Her eyes fixed on the cover, and for a second her face lost all color. "Good book?" she asked, but her voice came out tense, forced. "Haven't started it yet. The bookseller recommended it, said the author is very talented." I turned the book to show the cover better. "Rachel Morrison, do you know her?" The cup she was holding trembled imperceptibly in her hands. "No, not really. Mystery authors aren't my thing." But as she walked away, I saw her look back twice, her eyes glued to the book on my table. That night I looked up Rachel Morrison online. The author had published 3 critically acclaimed mystery novels, all bestsellers. The promotional photos showed an elegant woman, dark hair perfectly styled, smiling confidently at the cameras. There was something familiar about that face, but I couldn't quite place it. 2 days later, the incident that changed everything happened. Sophia had spilled her hot chocolate, and as Rachel cleaned up the mess, she started talking about watercolor painting techniques, specifically how to control the amount of water to prevent colors from bleeding. It was too much technical knowledge, too detailed for someone who claimed to be just a barista. "Where did you learn that?" I asked directly. Rachel stopped cleaning and stared at me. For a moment, I saw something akin to panic in her eyes. "YouTube," she said finally. "I watch a lot of tutorials," but her explanation didn't convince me, or apparently herself. The rest of that afternoon was marked by an uncomfortable silence, and when we left, Sophia asked why the coffee lady seemed sad. I started paying attention to other details. Rachel never talked about her personal life, never mentioned family or friends. When other locals tried to make small talk about her history in Millbrook, she skillfully deflected the conversation. Her hands were too soft for someone who'd been working with cleaning and coffee equipment for a long time, and occasionally I'd catch her looking out the window with a melancholic expression that seemed to carry the weight of deep secrets. The unraveling of the mystery began on Wednesday of the 3rd week. I was rereading a particularly well-written passage from Shadows on the Silent Lake when I noticed Rachel standing beside me, reading over my shoulder. When she realized I'd noticed, her eyes widened like a child caught doing something mischievous. "Sorry," she murmured. "It's just—" That part was always my favorite. The words tumbled out before she could control herself. We both froze, the weight of the revelation hanging in the air between us like thick smoke. Rachel knew she'd said too much, and I knew I'd discovered something she desperately tried to hide. "Rachel," I began carefully, "have you read this book before?" She took a step back, then another. I need to get back to work." But it was too late. That night, I studied every photo of Rachel Morrison I could find online, mentally comparing them to the face of the woman who had become part of our daily routine. The hair was different, longer and darker in the promotional photos, but the eyes were unmistakable. The same depth, the same intensity that had caught my attention from day one. Rachel Morrison, the acclaimed author, was serving coffee in a small Vermont town under a false identity. The discovery should have been exciting, like solving a complex puzzle. Instead, I felt a strange mix of betrayal and concern. Why would a successful author be hiding? What had led her to abandon her career and assume a completely different life? I researched more deeply and found the answer in literary gossip pages and newspaper articles from the past 2 years. Rachel Morrison had been accused of plagiarism by her former agent, Marcus Whitfield. He claimed she had stolen the central idea for her latest book from an unpublished manuscript he represented. The scandal exploded in the specialized media, publishers canceled contracts, and Rachel's reputation was destroyed practically overnight. The accusations seemed to have solid evidence, similar passages, similar narrative structures, even character names that coincided. Rachel had tried to defend herself publicly, but each statement only increased the controversy. Eventually, she simply disappeared from the literary scene, and the most recent articles speculated about where she might be hiding. Now I knew. The next morning, I arrived at Corner Dreams with a racing heart and a mind full of questions. Rachel was there as always, but something had changed in her demeanor. She seemed smaller, more fragile, as if she knew her secret had been discovered. "Good morning, Tyler," she said softly, but avoided my gaze. "Rachel," I began, and she flinched at hearing her name. "We need to talk." Just then, Beverly Patterson, Millbrook's biggest gossip, chose that exact moment to enter the cafe. Beverly was a woman in her 60s, perfectly styled gray hair, and a supernatural ability to appear at the most inconvenient times. "Tyler, dear," she exclaimed, approaching our table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How are you adapting to our little town?" "Very well, thank you," I replied politely, but my attention was completely focused on Rachel, who had gone pale behind the counter. Beverly followed my gaze and her smile widened dangerously. "Oh, you've become quite close to our Rachel, haven't you?" Funny how some people choose to start a new life in small places. There was venom in her words, and Rachel seemed to shrink even further. "In fact," Beverly continued, her voice growing louder so other customers could hear, "I always thought our dear barista looked familiar. Couldn't figure out where from until my granddaughter showed me an article online last night." My blood ran cold. I looked at Rachel, who was gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles were white. "Beverly," I began, trying to intervene, but she ignored me completely. "Did you know we have a celebrity living among us?" Beverly announced to the entire cafe. "Our Rachel isn't just a barista. She's Rachel Morrison, the famous author who got caught stealing other writers' work." The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes in the cafe turned to Rachel, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Sophia, who was quietly coloring beside me, lifted her head, confused, sensing the tension in the air. "Is it true?" I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. Rachel looked me directly in the eyes for the first time since Beverly had started her public attack. Tears shimmered on her face, but there was also a wounded dignity that broke my heart. "Yes," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "It's true." The cafe emptied quickly after Beverly's revelation. The few remaining customers whispered among themselves, casting curious and judgmental glances in Rachel's direction. Sophia held my hand tighter, her large eyes fixed on the face of the woman who had become an important part of our mornings. "Rachel," I said firmly, getting up from the table. "Can we talk in private?" She nodded silently and gestured towards the small room at the back of the establishment. Beverly opened her mouth to protest, but a stern look from me made her reconsider. I picked Sophia up and followed Rachel away from curious eyes. The back room was small and cluttered, filled with coffee supplies and some old chairs stacked in the corner. Rachel leaned against the wall, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. For a moment, none of us spoke. Sophia broke the silence first. "Why was that lady mean to you?" she asked Rachel directly, with the brutal honesty only children possess. Rachel knelt down to Sophia's level, and tears finally began to stream down her face. "Because people sometimes believe bad things about other people, even when those things aren't true. Like when the kids at school say I'm weird because I don't talk much." Sophia tilted her head, genuinely interested in the comparison. "Exactly like that," Rachel whispered, and for the first time since I met her, her voice carried complete vulnerability. I put Sophia down and approached Rachel. "Tell me your side of the story. All of it." Rachel took a deep breath, wiping her face with the back of her hands. My name is really Rachel Morrison. I wrote 3 mystery books that became successful. I had a good life, an apartment in Boston, contracts with major publishers. She paused, looking out the small, dirty window of the room. Marcus Whitfield was my agent for 4 years. He knew all my projects, read my drafts, knew my ideas even before I finished them. When I started working on my 4th book, Broken Mirrors, I shared every step of the development with him. What happened? I asked gently. Marcus had another client, a budding writer named David Chen. David had written a manuscript that was never published, about a detective investigating crimes in a small town. Marcus held on to that manuscript for months, claiming he was looking for the right publisher. Rachel began pacing the small room. 6 months after I sent Broken Mirrors to him, Marcus called me, furious. He said I had stolen ideas from David's manuscript, that there were too many common elements for it to be a coincidence. He threatened to expose me publicly if I didn't admit to plagiarism and split the royalties with David. Had you read David's manuscript? Never. I didn't even know it existed. Rachel stopped pacing and looked directly at me. But Marcus had copies of all my notes, all my drafts, all the conversations we had about the story's development. When he made the accusations public, he presented evidence that seemed undeniable. Sophia had sat on the floor and started drawing in her pad, but I could tell she was listening to every word. What actually happened was the opposite, Rachel continued, her voice growing stronger. Marcus took my ideas and retroactively inserted them into David's manuscript. He had access to everything. He knew exactly which elements to copy to make it look like I had stolen. Why would he do that? Money and control. Marcus wanted a larger percentage of my earnings, and when I refused to renegotiate our contract, he decided to destroy me. With David as an accomplice, he could completely control the Gazette narrative and still profit from my work through another client. The story made sense in a disturbing way. It explained not only the accusations, but also why Rachel had disappeared completely, instead of continuing to fight them publicly. Why didn't you sue? Why didn't you fight? Rachel laughed bitterly. Do you think I didn't try? I hired lawyers, tried to prove my innocence, but Marcus had built the case perfectly. He had documents that proved David had written his story first. He had recorded conversations where I supposedly discussed elements that could only have come from David's manuscript. Fake recordings? Edited. Marcus took real conversations we had about my book and edited them to make it sound like I was talking about someone else's work. In the digital age, it's surprisingly easy to manipulate evidence if you know what you're doing. Sophia looked up from her drawing. Daddy, can you find out if she's telling the truth? My daughter's innocent question hit me like a lightning bolt. I had spent years as a creative director, analyzing details, checking sources, investigating claims before approving campaigns. If there was evidence of Rachel's innocence, I could find it. Do you have any original documentation? Dated drafts, emails, anything that proves you developed these ideas independently? Rachel nodded hesitantly. I have some files saved on an external hard drive. I was afraid to access them because I thought Marcus might be monitoring my online activities. Where are you living? I have a small apartment above the pharmacy on Main Street. It's simple, but it has internet. I made a decision at that moment. Let's go there now. I'll help you review everything and figure out the truth. For the next 3 days, I became a private detective. Rachel brought all her digital files, and we began to build a detailed chronology of the development of Broken Mirrors. Sophia sat with us, quietly coloring as we worked, occasionally making surprisingly insightful observations about inconsistencies we found. The metadata on Rachel's files clearly showed that she had started working on her story months before the alleged date of David's manuscript. More importantly, I found earlier versions of her drafts that contained elements that didn't appear in David's original manuscript, elements that would only make sense if she had developed them organically. I hired a digital forensics expert to examine the recordings Marcus had presented as evidence. The report confirmed my suspicions. The recordings had been digitally edited, with cuts and insertions that completely altered the context of the conversations. The most damaging discovery came when I traced the communications between Marcus and David. Using data recovery tools, I found deleted emails that clearly showed the conspiracy. Marcus instructed David on which elements to add to his manuscript, and they discussed strategies to make the accusations against Rachel more convincing. "Tyler," Rachel said on the third night when we finally finished compiling all the evidence, "why are you doing this? Why do you care so much about proving my innocence?" I looked at Sophia, who had fallen asleep on the sofa with her drawing pad open on her chest. On one of the pages, she had drawn 3 figures holding hands, 2 big and 1 small, but this time there was no empty space. "Because Sophia was right all along," I replied. "She saw something in you that took me a long time to recognize, and because innocent people don't deserve to carry the weight of guilt for other people's crimes." Rachel started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief, not despair. "There's something else," I continued. "I found evidence that Marcus did this to other clients too. You weren't his first victim." 6 months later, life in Millbrook had completely transformed for all of us. Rachel was back to writing, working on a new novel that promised to be her best work yet. The evidence we compiled not only cleared her name, but also led to Marcus and David facing criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. Corner Dreams was still our favorite breakfast spot, but now Rachel sat with us as part of the family, not just as the person behind the counter. Sophia was back to talking normally, filling our mornings with stories about her imaginary adventures and endless questions about the world around her. "Daddy," Sophia said one morning as she watched Rachel write on her laptop, "do you think Mommy would have liked Rachel?" The question caught me off guard, but when I looked at Rachel, her hair loose, shining in the morning light, smiling as she typed, completely at ease in our presence, I knew the answer immediately. "I think your mom would have loved Rachel," I replied honestly, "and I think she'd be happy to know we found someone so special to be part of our family." Rachel looked up from her laptop and smiled, a genuine, full smile that lit up the entire cafe. "I love you both," she said simply. Sophia jumped from her chair and ran to hug Rachel. "We love you too. Daddy, can we ask Rachel to live with us forever?" "What do you think, Rachel?" I asked, my heart pounding with hope and nervousness. "I think that would be perfect," she replied, and at that moment I knew we had found our happy ending. Sometimes the darkest secrets lead us to the brightest truths. Sometimes the people who seem most broken are exactly the ones who can help us mend ourselves. And sometimes, when we least expect it, love appears disguised as a mysterious barista in a small Vermont town, bringing with it the promise that everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment below about your own experiences with second chances and how love appeared in your life when you least expected it. Until the next story.